Hi guys, this is Greg with Walnut Ridge Family RV Sales. Today we're going to talk about propane and propane accessories on your RV. So we'll talk about the LP system on your RV, and it really doesn't matter whether you're a fifth wheel, travel trailer. Now motorhomes are an exception. They use a different style of tank. So fifth wheels or travel trailers typically are going to run a two tank system with a dual stage regulator in between. Now, whether it's up here on the front or in a compartment for a fifth wheel, most travel trailers are all up front. Some of them will have integrated covers into the front cap that you have to take off, but most of them will have a cover like this that goes over while you're traveling. You want to first always make sure that you have that cover, so if for some reason it's ever broken or damaged, definitely want to get that replaced. Going to the LP tanks themselves, if you have two, which most RVs do, some only have one, and we'll just talk about dual stage here, or dual tank regulators. Essentially, you'll have a regulator in the middle that will control the flow from whichever tank. Most of them are what they call an auto switchover regulator. It'll look like this. It'll have a valve in the middle that you can rotate between each tank. And while we're looking at it, if you look here, what it's going to do is if I leave one tank on and one tank off, right now it's pointing at that tank here on my right. As you can see, since this tank has gas in it, this is clear. Some of them will show green, but a lot of these will show clear. And then whenever it's empty, it will go to red. So no, it takes a minute sometimes for it to switch to the red, but that'll go red. So that is your indicator of how the tank actually, if there's gas in it or not. So it's either has gas or it doesn't. What the auto switchover portion of it does is when you have two tanks, you can leave both tanks open, and then whichever way this valve is pointing, it will draw off that one tank first. Once that tank is empty, that will go red, and it will automatically start pulling from this tank. So if you check periodically, if you are running your system like that, if you have an older unit that has a gas fridge, or if you're running the furnace a lot, you'll want to come out and check. If you see that that's red, you know, oh, hey, this tank's empty. Now it's pulling from this tank. You'll want to go ahead and switch your lever over, because when it's in this mode, let's say that this tank is now empty and it's drawing off of this tank, it only pulls part of the BTUs from the tank. So if it's in auto switchover mode, sometimes the furnace won't fire correctly or other appliances won't work because it's only using some of the BTUs of the LP itself. So that's why you'll want to make sure that you switch it over. Now that you know this one's empty, I'm going to switch it to this one. So now I know this one is getting pulled from, this one is empty. I would shut it off. Most regulators, if they are working properly, you could take this off now and go get it filled while you still have this one running. Now that's one way of using them. Now the other way would be if you don't, have your fridge on gas all the time, or you're running your furnace in the winter to where you're just using your cooktop or your oven or other small appliances that use LP, I would recommend you leave one of them off. So we'll shut this tank off. We'll have it drawing from this tank. And then I know once my stove or my oven or whatever stops working, hey, this one's empty and this one is full. So I'll switch my valve over, turn this tank on, and now I know I still have one full tank. The only problem with doing it the other way, where you have both tanks open, is that if this switches, you won't notice. Could be for who knows how long, and now you may have this tank all the way empty, and that tank's already empty, obviously. So once it started drawing off this tank, could have been a few days ago, you don't know exactly how much you have. So at least when you leave one of them off, you know that you have one tank, and you know you have however many days it takes before you burn through a tank typically. A common misconception I've seen is that you should that I see a lot of these valves. Now, whether yours is this black one, some of them are a white turn knob, they should never be in this down position. I think they can cause damage to the regulator, or leaks too. But either way, it's not doing anything different. It's not going to pull from both tanks doing it that way at the same time. It's just causing the mechanism inside that defers which side it's pulling from to probably not work correctly. So always leave it one way or the other. So that's the operation of the LP system. Fairly simple. The regulator takes the PSI from the tank, drops it down to inches of water column, and then feeds to the rest of the RV, and that's what will feed your furnace and your stove and things like that. So now we talk about the maintenance of your LP system. Most important things to know, I've seen this quite a few times, and I've used to think this was a law, but I don't, from what I can research, it is not. That most of the time these regulators are put on the back of the tanks here, and it makes it hard to read that. And so you can see how this one's in the front. Now, I've always was told years ago that it, by law, should be facing the rear, because if something comes up off the truck and hits, it can cause damage to it. But from what I can tell, the only law that's out there is more in depth that you won't have any control of, besides when you remove the tanks to get them filled. As you can see, those are not secure. You have the twisting knob on the top that will lock the bar down and keep the tanks tight. So what you want to make sure is that you get your tank into the tray, and it's not like sitting up on one of the lips. You get it down in there securely. You get the bar that's holding it into the notch, and then you tighten it up, and the regulation is that it's takes 8 times the weight of the filled cylinders to when you're pushing it. So it should be able to take 8 times the weight of whichever tank you have, both of them combined filled weight. It's kind of confusing. Just make sure that it's tight, and that you can't just wobble it around. Even that feels a little loose to me, so I'll probably have one of our technicians look into it and make sure that it's able to be cranked down the way it should be. So you want to have it nice and solid. That way, if a wreck does happen or something, that these aren't getting broken off, possibly causing a fire or explosion. Depending on the unit, you have 2 sizes of tanks that are popular. Most of them are either 20-pound tanks, which are 4.5 gallons, and then 30-pound tanks, the taller ones, are 30 gallon. 30 pound, 7 gallons, 30-pound tanks. So if you have one or the other, it doesn't really matter. If you have the smaller ones, you could always upgrade to the bigger ones. You usually just have to get a longer threaded rod and a bigger cover, and that way you could upgrade. So if you are burning through a little bit more LP than you'd like, and you're getting them filled often, that's an option. The tanks that come, if you buy a new unit, will be obviously brand new tanks. And I know it's really hard not to take that brand new tank when you run out and run down to your local store and have it exchanged, because the convenience is there, and trying to find some place to fill a tank is not always feasible. But if you can, it's always best to take it somewhere to get it filled. A lot of truck stops, like Love's over there, does it, and some other, a lot of places, most RV places, fill LP tanks. And the main reason is because these have a lot of different things that a RV tech or somebody that's trained to fill LP is going to look for. Mainly date of manufacture. There's a 10-year limit essentially on the tanks before they need to be recertified. We check for dents and make sure that if there is any small dents, they're over a certain, or they're under a certain parameter, so that we can legally fill the tank safely. We check and make sure that there's not rust that's going to cause damage. And when you get the ones from exchange places, a lot of times they do check them out fairly well, but you also get some, there's some bad ones out there I've seen that they don't particularly check the best and to the specifications that they should be. So if you can, have them filled. And then we'll bring it down to maintenance. There is maintenance and things you should have checked on the LP system. As you can see, I'll show you on this one. This unit here, what year is this? We're looking at a 2017, so roughly 5 years old. If I take this LP hose off, you can see, you can't really see, but if you can see me struggling with it, very stiff. This should be fairly flimsy. I mean, it's just a rubber hose. And as stiff as that is, if this was cleaned up, I'm sure it's hard to tell. You ain't going to be able to tell on camera. You'll start seeing light dry rotting, cracking. And these are something that you'll want to have inspected, every couple years at least. Because once these dry rot, crack, then you're going to have gas escape. You can also have that, at the trunk line that goes down into the unit, but it's mainly these up here. You can also, what you'll want to have checked is having an LP drop test done, which we of course do on every unit that we sell. That's the biggest thing that we make sure of, is that we do a gas test. So essentially what we do is we'll shut one of the tanks off, we'll turn it on, let it pressurize the system. We check a parameter on our meter that will tell us if the regulator is outputting to the proper pressure, not over. And then we'll shut the tank off. So now all the gas that's in the line is sealed. There should be no escape. And if you come inside, I'll show you. Okay, so once we have the LP system turned on and then we turn it back off, there's propane flowing through all the lines and there should be no escape. Now that we have the tank off, everything up to this point is sealed, at least it should be. So what we do is we have a tool, a gauge called a manometer, that reads in inches of water column, which is what LP is measured in. And essentially what we do is we hook it up to the stove, we'll turn it on and we get a reading, and then we will turn on the burners and just let the gas kind of escape, and we drop the gauge down to 8 inches of water column, and we want to let that sit for 3 minutes. And if it does not fall within that 3 minutes, sometimes we like to let it go a little bit longer, but 3 minutes is the 8 inches, and 3 minutes is the regulation that we're on right now. And if it drops in that 3 minutes, then there's a leak somewhere in the system. And then from there, we have to track it down. It could be anywhere. It could be at the regulator. It could be, behind the refrigerator. It could be underneath, going to the water heater. Anywhere the fittings that they've ran that line junctioned into and then went up into the unit at multiple different places could be a leak. So we're not going to let this go through the whole process, but that's something that I would recommend you have done at least once a year, because you can have these small little leaks, and if it's not inside the coach, you won't always smell it, and you could have a small leak that turns into a big leak over time. And then, propane is highly flammable, and it can cause an issue. So I'd recommend when you bring it in to a service department for year-end maintenance, maybe get the maintenance package that includes having an LP test done. We can go through and run a test, look at the tanks, make sure they're all in spec, check the hoses, make sure those are not dry rotted and going to cause problems later on. So that's probably one of the most important things to do safety wise on the systems, besides your other maintenance like roof seals and all that good stuff. So we definitely recommend doing that. If you have any questions about anything with your LP system, feel free to give us a call. If not, we'll see you next week.